Yo, 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 and I'm live! It's the Nazarite bringing you Hebrew lore from days of yore. So, because of the difference in Torah readings between Israel and the rest of the world that's been going on for the last month and a half, I will be doing Naso twice, and then continuing on next week with the Torah portions as they regularly are. So, this time I'm doing it twice to catch up, or rather to be left behind. And it's fitting that I do it with Naso because Naso is the longest Torah portion that there is. It's huge. So it's only, it's only apt that I will go through it twice. I want to talk about a video that I saw last night by a YouTuber named Aliza Lipkin, and I'll put the link down there or over there. And it's the only video I've seen of hers so far. I just saw it last night, but I wanted to share the idea with you. So Naso has this progression, which may not seem to be threaded with anything at a glance. Right? It has the end of the two Levitical families of Gershon and Merari, what they're in charge of, and then it's the movement of the camps, how that would go, how they would move, how they would camp. Then there is it was sending people away from the camp, which I spoke of in last week. And then there is the idea of what happens when one commits theft of some kind, right? Okay. And how do you make amends, right? The whole idea of reparations and how that works, restitution, whatever the term is. And then there is the woman gone astray, the Isha Sota, then the laws of the Nazarite, the priestly blessings, and then finally the dedication of the altar by the heads of the tribes. So how does that all sort of go? What's the progression there? Is there something that's threading these together? And she went on to say this, that it all pertains to the individual and their role. And see, she says this. She says, the Levites each had their own. I mean, I'm not giving it verbatim or word for word, and I'm going to give sort of my take on it as I talk. You can watch the original in that video. She says that the Levites, they each had their own portion of, taking care of business, whatever it was. They had a task. They were commanded and were overseen, rather, by the priests, Itamar and Elazar, Aaron's sons, his remaining sons. And then she says that's part of knowing who you are. It's part of knowing who you are. And then later on, when you decide to stop doing bad things, to, let's say, if you took something, bring it back, it's about making restitution to yourself, becoming a better person. It's about getting yourself in order. So the whole idea of being cast away from the camp, the idea of making restitution, the idea of getting your family together. Once you're, as Dr. Peterson would say, once you're shined up a little bit, then maybe you could reach out a little bit more further and get your family in order, which we see expressed in the Isha Sota, the woman gone astray. Or that's not the right way to say it. Yeah, that's how I say it. After the Isha Sota, the woman, the deal with the adulteress or supposed adulteress is the Nazarite. After you can get your family in order and you have that support, family is an amazing tool and vessel of support, or it has the potential to be. And once you get that in order as well as yourself, and you have that, close-knit sort of pillar, something that sustains you, then you could reach even higher than you could have were you just on your own. And when you get your family in order, you're able to reach higher things, and that's expressed through the laws of the Nazarite. After the laws of the Nazarite is the priestly blessing, where there is the desire for God to lift his countenance on you and give you peace. That kind of thing, where it's not just you doing something, now there's already God, the feedback coming back from creation, from God. You do something, God does something. It's a game. It's the give and take, the yin and yang, the whole thing. It's a serpent kind of a shape, going in and out of chaos and order, the comfort and discomfort, that whole thing. And then, at the end of the Torah portion, after the priestly blessings, there is the dedication of the altar by the heads of the tribes, the 12 heads of the tribes. This comes at the end. Now, each head of tribe brought, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the very same offering at the dedication of the temple. This is something I think the Midrash, the external teachings of our sages, they say that it wasn't something they planned ahead. It was just something that happened because there was such unity. It was something that happened. They all sort of received this, they were moved to act this way and bring this much incense and this much, whatever it was, right? Everything. They brought each one of them brought the same offering. So that came through unity. And when Solomon dedicated the altar at the temple, not the tabernacle, the temple, many, many years later, hundreds of years later, there was unity there too. And that's, I think, what really facilitates the presence of God, the divine presence, because you can have it as an individual. There's a very famous line from the lore of the prophet Elijah where he says, I lift my hand up and I swear that right in the name of what is it? The earth and the heavens and the earth will testify that whether man or woman, Gentile or Israel or Hebrew, whatever you are and whoever you are and whenever you are, it's according to your deeds that the Holy Spirit will rest on you. So you can do that as an individual. You can have that Holy Spirit resting on you. How do you reach it as a collective? It's through unity. And this Torah portion is basically a progression where it's one thing leading into the next. Knowing who you are, taking care of yourself, knowing your flaws, knowing your strength, getting yourself in order, getting your family in order, being able to go higher, having that support, reaching out, getting that divine blessing and helping to bring unity. And that is where God can rest in a more collective and global sense, when there's unity. When you read the Bible, there's so much. I mean, well, certainly after the kingdom was torn to Judah and Israel. I mean, the kingdom of Judah, it was. I mean, it must have been such a blow after many years of being together, and it was just ripped apart. But at the time of the dedication of the temple, one generation before that, King Solomon, his son Rehoboam, he's the one who had the kingdom torn from him. But at the time of Solomon, there was unity. It came at a price, but there was unity. I mean, Solomon drove the people hard. He was, well, never mind. Let's not get into it. But I mean, he was a wise king and a noble king, but he was also driving the people hard. He didn't mess around. I think he was a real ruler, not just of Israel, but everyone around used to, pay homage to Solomon. At some point, I mean, I'm sure I'm not a historian and I don't know the stats or facts, but I think that at one time, Solomon ruled a large area. It's interesting what unity can facilitate. This is also, it could be taken to the bad side too, because you can be united in malice and wickedness and iniquity. You can be united in working things that are not good for you and do it all with great gusto and verve. Doesn't make it right. That's why before that unity, there's the individual who recognizes him or herself, the responsibility. They take steps to right themselves. It means, I think, that if more people do it, there will be greater unity. And if there is unity to a side that is not good, this person who's already adapted a certain amount of responsibility and has a certain amount of like integrity, with oneself, that person would be able to withstand, at least to some degree, would be able to withstand that certain pressure, certain going with the flow, with the stream. This Torah portion is the longest one, and it's almost seemingly, the different things are kind of, you could say that you're forcing the progression there. Maybe. I don't think that she was, Lisa Lipkin. And I kind of really vibed with it. I liked it. She said that she hadn't shared it before. It was sort of the first time she shared it. I had threaded those series of seemingly unrelated things. But there's a lot there. So I like it. And that's why I'm talking about that. What other thing that I want to talk about in regards to Naso? I wanted to continue what I was speaking about last week of sending people away from the camp. I read up later in the Talmud, it says that the three examples that are given there, meaning somebody who has been in contact with a dead body, somebody who has this sort of gushing skin or the wound, right, that's gushing blood, and somebody who has biblical leprosy, tzarat, those three are not all sent out of all of the camps. One of them is from the Levitical camp, the other one is from the Israelite camp, and the third one, the leper, is of all of them, out of all of them. But I was thinking that even so, what I said does, I mean, it does compute, it makes sense, it still makes sense. I like the idea that the Torah would give, I mean, it names them as one outside of the camp. If you go into the oral law, you see that there's a difference, which is a great teaching because it's not one size fits all. It's not all or nothing. Just as there are degrees of, uh, well, of holiness, of sacredness, like between a Sabbath and a festival, a holiday, or the day of the holiday of atonement, Yom Kippur, and the rest of the year, or Purim for that matter, and the rest of the year. There are different levels of being sacred, of being holy, and there are also different levels of defilement. At the time that the people of Israel went out of Egypt, there's a teaching that says that they were immersed into 49 out of 50 gates of defilement, of impurity, of uncleanliness. And that after those 50 days of being in the desert, going through what they were going through, doing what they were doing, then on the 50th day, they were able to sort of break through, receive the Torah. And when I was talking about getting the Torah last week, or earlier this week on Tuesday, in the Torah. I enjoyed doing that video. I really enjoyed doing the last time on the Torah. I don't think I've ever done something as general, but that's what I felt, a day or two after the festival. Getting the Torah again. So sending people away from the camp. And I mentioned how it's something that we don't necessarily need to practice to a T because we are all impure and unclean to a certain degree. Not having the temple means that we are all unclean in some way. Whether it's temporary or not, that's up to us. And some of it isn't up to us, or perhaps it is all up to us, but it's both. It's both. Sending people away from the camp is something that can seem very, very harsh, really harsh. I mean, especially for someone who also may be contagious physically, not just spiritually or in a bad place. I mean, when we're talking about purity and impurity, cleanliness and uncleanness, we're talking about the physical. The spiritual uncleanliness, if you will, is another issue. They had to be sent away. They can't all be, they can't be there. They can't. There's a place where you belong. There's a place where you don't, and it's very cold, very calculated. Very, very, it's like I said, it's harsh. It's difficult to think of it, which raises the question, how often were they impure? We know that women, because they were menstruating, for some degree of time, they were impure. And again, this doesn't mean evil, wicked, or unclean in a filthy or nasty kind of way. When I say that a woman menstruating is unclean, it means ritually unclean. I don't consider the woman's cycle to be anything but the purest of emanations, and I'll leave it at that. But there's a kind of purity there and an impurity, and there's a way to regain purity. In every instance, there's a way to regain purity. The body is meant to go through them. The body is meant to, at some point, be away from one of those camps or all of them. I mean, biblical leprosy supposedly isn't around anymore, if I remember correctly, and good thing too. But it's thinking about it in a way of, why would the person gain leprosy? Well, because they were misusing their tongue, speaking ill of others, or spreading rumors, and doing things of that nature. The wicked tongue that's wagging. Mr. Chatterbox, Bob Marley called those people. And if you do that and you speak ill of your fellow people, I mean, if it's merited and it's in a certain way, obviously you can speak your mind and you should speak your mind, but there's a way to do it. somebody who would merit, who would be, not merit, somebody who would be afflicted with leprosy because of the way they were speaking. That means that they need some time away from society in order to contemplate the severity of what they've been doing and how they've been conducting themselves in the world. This isn't something far away. This is you talking about your neighbor, your friend, your buddy, and that's not cool. That's not even God and man, right? That's a person doing something to another person, but getting judged, so to speak, and punished, right, or rectified by God, who will afflict him with this disease, this illness. There's this connection here, and it's more important in some ways than the connection to the Most High, in so much as the way that you treat each other. The way that I treat God is no way at all, because I don't know God. All I know is how God relates to me, so I know, or I strive to treat that revelation and emanation in a certain way. But it's not me treating God like this way or that way. It's all a mirror of my own self. When it's a different person, that's another consciousness. That's a human being, and it's more important to do good unto others than to do good unto God, even though that's one and the same. If I had to choose, it would be doing good for other people. And the prophets have echoed this countless, so many times, and not just people, right? Earthlings. If you read Proverbs, again, King Solomon, where he says, it is better to have a plate of greens and love is there than a fat ox with hatred. Treat each other right, even if it means you have less. You can be content with it if you treat each other right. It's a very deep teaching, and it's very sort of simplistic, but it's nonetheless that deep. Simple and deep don't need to contradict, not at all. So this is Naso part 2. Next week I'll be with Ha'alotcha, which is amazing. It really is. Next week is also an anniversary for me. Woohoo! So it's going to be an amazing week. I can tell. Let's have a wonderful Sabbath. Let's be good. Let's make good decisions. Let's rest. Let's elevate, right? Naso, lift up. Let's lift ourselves up and give praises to the Most High and eat right and be with one another and rest and learn and be joyful. God bless.